welcome to Camper Machine Podcast for our finale of the Money Moves at Summer Camp series with Kenny Brook. We're going to get into some nitty gritty here, talking about exactly what it looks like to tokenize, authenticate, save cards. How exactly does that work? What are you responsible for? There's a lot to see. All right. Welcome back to Camp Business Financials, Money Moves at Summer Camp. I'm Eric Whit from Camper Machine, here with Kenny Brook from Click.
Hello, Eric.
We've got really the genesis of the whole series of shows comes down to this show. Mm-hmm. This is where everyone begins. Every camp director has one job, one first job, which is get people to camp and start collecting money. And then they can get into the fun stuff of programming and everything else. So we're going to cover all the different ways that camps can collect money. And obviously that is very different for a lot of camps across the country, around the globe, ranging from PDF applications and checks, which I had one of those. I saw one the other day. For real, not kidding. All the way to, you probably have a camp it wants to accept crypto. So, and I guess there's really no way but just to dive in.
I think the way to kick it off is I was having a conversation with a good friend, Andy Pritikin, right, at Liberty Lake Day Camp. And Andy said, if any camp director ever says, I don't accept credit cards, it's a simple conversation. Why are you chasing money? Why are you waiting on money? Why do you not want money today, now, immediately? It's that simple. He said, my accounts receivable went to zero when I started accepting credit cards. So credit cards really is a way to just say, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you want to pay for camp? I'll take that payment. Right?
Yeah.
That's the short and simple answer to why do you take credit cards?
Yeah.
But
as we know, the camp world is not always so eager to jump and change ways sometimes. So the 75-year-old camp that's still taking a PDF they're out there.
Yeah.
So what is the case? I mean, you described, a summary there from Andy, but what's the rational sort of like business case and brass tacks of what happens when you take a credit card as a payment? What's the difference between that and a check per se, or cash in hand on the first day?
So it starts with, how do you make it easy? How do you make it easy for your customer to enroll and to join you and say, yes, my child gets to go to your camp, and commit to it, right? It's about the commitment. The payment is secure my space, hold my spot, my child gets to go to camp. And the credit card is just that's how we pay. That's how we pay for things, online, over the phone, in person, you name it. It's that 15 or 16 digit card number translates to money in the bank. and there are different card brands. You got Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover. Internationally, you've got the China Union Pay and Japanese bank card, and then you've got not just credit cards, but you got the debit cards, right? You got the debit networks that work straight out of your bank account and go through that transaction. So that's the big picture. Is you want to be open, you want to be able to accept, you want to make it simple, so that however that parent is paying, or that grandparent or aunt and uncle, they're using their Google Pay, their Apple Pay, their card on file.
Speaking of making it simple, for the longest time, once, or back in the early days, probably 15 years ago, once we were made the switch to take credit cards, we were still Amex holdouts. And it was all about that final 0.5% from my cold dead hand. It was like, so is that still a thing? Do people kind of draw the line there?
It's still a perception. So when I started back in the day, Amex had just become number 2. Visa is the largest acceptance around the globe, right? Amex was number 3, MasterCard was number 2, and Amex overtook MasterCard. They became greater in acceptance across purchasing. So they are that significant. And what's changed? Why is their global impact changed? Because they made it easier to accept. Again, it used to be something different. You had to have a direct and specific, unique relationship to Amex in order to accept. And many camps have that direct relationship because of either better rates or more direct, influence and accessibility to the American Express world. Because they're unique in that they are both the issuer of the card and the bank processing acquirer. They're just a big bank, right? So what changed is they really worked with the independent processing relationships, we call them the acquiring relationships, to give a choice. You can work with Amex Direct, or you can go through the program called OptBlue, which is where it's incorporated and handled just like Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and it all settles and deposits in your bank in kind of one area.
Wait a second.
Too deep?
I'm flashing the timeout signal here. Because I think I just learned something that I thought I knew better about, but I think didn't know it. Because we've already covered in the first episode, the card cycle and the payments and requirements. There's a layer of technology and hardware that I think you're alluding to. And are you telling me that the option that me and most other camp people have accepted is the OptBlue option, where you have one funnel for credit cards to go through, one piece of hardware, and then the rates are amalgamated for better for our purposes here, and they go through one system. But there are some camps that have an individual relationship with Amex and get preferable rates if they choose to do that work.
Yeah. And so that's a unique distinction there, right? Historically, camps that would have a direct relationship with Amex could have preferred rates from Amex. That's a historic thing that happened about 10 years ago. And believe it or not, I think it was influenced by a camp owner director and a camp parent at Amex. That's the urban legend, but I honestly think it might be correct that, hey, wait a second. Look at us. The camp community is unique. And though it's, as we've talked about, viewed as a risky environment, is a very trusted relationship. So there became this little caveat and reclassification, if you will, that camps do benefit from, right?
Kenny, how many people have their own Amex merchant accounts?
In my experience, most did over the last 10 or 15 years. Most had that unique relationship. And we
have that at Brook.
Most people, that benefit was fantastic until things got weird during COVID, right? We talked a little bit about some of those COVID pitfalls where, wait a second, is everything okay? Camp going to happen? What's going on? What's the financial picture? So the camps that had that direct relationship kind of got into a precarious place last year with all the weird stuff that happened.
Because it's asymmetrical by an order of magnitude. They don't want to. There's just no chance. Camp Run Amok is going to go appeal to Amex.
So while that was happening, the camps that were using the OptBlue program, where it was really combined and one and the same with Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, it wasn't a differentiation. It was, you were seen as the whole picture, and the relationship you have is taking care of the whole picture. Okay, so some camps benefited from being in OptBlue and having those deposits all combined, and other ones worked with their relationship on their direct relationship to manage that through. So that's a whole nother conversation.
There are so
with anybody, right?
There are so many hidden trapdoors in your house, man. So okay, so we're gonna skip that one. We'll skip the Amex separate relationship. We'll cut off that detour for a second.
But I will speak to, again, offering it, accepting it. The more cards you accept, the more choices you're giving your consumer. That's a good thing From a
Yeah.
consumer perspective, you're respecting my choice by opening the door to all card types.
Yes. And on that note, all card types. I remembered that decision to say, oh, we're going to do it. We're going to come up with a generic fee and we're going to just eat the cost on the credit card actual percentages.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone knows that Amex charges more because you got to get those diners points or whatever they are. I don't use my Amex for rewards, so I was a generic jab at Amex. But the idea that Amex charges more and Visa, MasterCard, Diners Club, not Diner, what's the other one?
Discover. Discover, sure.
Like, they charge less, and so they're more preferable. That's our perception. I'm speaking as the public. The perception is Amex charges up here close to or above 3% on a transaction-ish generically, and the others are down here, charging less. How much less? I don't know, but generically they're less. Is that real?
No, that's a carryover from years past as well. And the reality is, the more the cards, the more attractive a card is to a consumer, right? You talked about points or benefits or rewards or any of this stuff, right? The more attractive that is, the higher the cost, because the cost of benefit needs to be offset by the cost of expense. So it really has to come from somewhere. So all card types have a range from the lowest end of cost, the debit card, if you will, that's just really drafting money out of your bank account, to the signature preferreds, the World Points, the high-end, high-value cards. Those are the ones that do have higher cost, and the cost is borne by the benefit and the reward side of the equation. So that is not a new thing, and it really has, I think, leveled the playing field within all card brands.
Really? Okay, so now this is, we're not going to dive too deep into this, but I feel like we can't really go much, we can't skip over this either.
Okay.
One of the only touch points that a great, camp operator interacts with their payment provider, processing partner, is with the settlements for the month and the rates that they deal with and see for the batch. Like, what was the last 3 months, was the last quarter, and if you see that, if you have a deposit for your camp session that's $1,000, you're going to see rates all across the board. What gives? Is that real? Are we getting ripped off?
Oh, no.
How does a human that's not in the payment provider game understand and come to terms with that? How do you deal with it?
The reality is, the process, the infrastructure, the banks, everything that's required, the network that's required to facilitate and handle all of that decisioning that goes on from the consumer side to the business side and everything in between, costs money, right? And the world of commerce has driven the prices down as much as possible. It really has reduced those costs over time. And the reason that there's this either one rate out there, you think of a PayPal or a Square or Stripe, these aggregated solutions that have one cost and simplified methodology, versus I have pages of individual Visas and MasterCards and Discovers, right? Why are there so many different card types? And the reality is, that's the origin. We call it interchange, right? Those are the individual amounts from every card type out there, hundreds of card types across the different brands. And if you're in a simplified structure, a one rate structure, then Stripe, for example, 2.9% and 30 cents a transaction. Easy. I can count on it. I know what it is. Well, it's got to account for all the different cards within it that are processed. Yeah. If you're fortunate enough to have a pricing model that has all that detail, what you're really saying is, your relationship is saying, we're giving you cost. We're giving you the wholesale cost and telling you exactly how much cost on that exists. So that's really the pros and cons. Not about ripoff. In fact, there's never been a greater time of transparency in payment processing. The information is all out there.
So I'm gonna be this. I'm gonna do this on video. I'm showing you. This is not. You can't see the numbers.
Oh, hide that number.
I have no numbers on here. I have 2 different Chase cards in my wallet. Visa Chase credit cards. One is a Sapphire. One is a Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
This is. I just want to say this, and you can tell me if this is correct. Those cards will carry on $1,000 charge to the same camp a slightly different fee for processing them because of the rewards.
Absolutely, they can. Yep, absolutely, they can have a different cost associated to them.
So that's part 1. But part 2 is you're saying, I'm going to replay what you just said back to you as part 2 of this. If you have a healthy and good relationship with your provider, you'll be able to see those different rates and understand, does anybody like say pay with your Chase Freedom for like, earn a credit to the canteen, if they find out the more preferable cards.
You mean incentivizing behavior? Yeah. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, but I mean like at the card specific level.
No. It's per the agreement you have with the card brands. To accept the card brands, you're saying I'm accepting all card types. I'm accepting all card brand types within it, right?
Which helps them sell to all the other people how to make 1 million different types of credit cards.
Well, yeah. And again, how do you differentiate the card? How do you encourage consumer behavior? How do you reward people for their purchasing, right? Why use my credit card, this credit card over that credit card, as you have 2 in your hand? Yeah, and again, it goes to who are you more satisfied as a consumer using? Who do you get better service from? Who do you feel is more widely accepted?
Is there a summer camp points card out there?
Not yet.
Right. Maybe that's
a whole other world.
That's another one of Click's trap doors we won't go down.
Hey, let's open that door another time.
That's another
opportunity that's coming, right?
We'll punt that a couple episodes down the road.
The reality is, though, that yes, there can be benefits to different card types, but there's really no value in making a differentiation in your acceptance. The acceptance should be, I accept them, I accept all types, and let's do the best we can from a cost standpoint to get the the lowest rates available. And frankly, that's what resonates with my camp owners and directors is, hey, I want to know what I'm paying for. I want to know what the costs are, and I want the best available. And how can I do that? What can I do to achieve that? Right?
Yeah. So basically all the cheapo camp directors out there who've been stressing about the 0.5% difference that might exist between a couple of credit cards, deal with it. Think of it like sunk cost in terms of being able to take any credit card and be proud of that and move on.
Those are business expenses anyways, right? That's overall cost of doing business.
But it's so hard because that like Amex difference is so deep in our psyche.
Well, but I'd ask you the question, if you're an Amex holder, you want to use your card, right? And how upset are you when you don't get to use that card? Oh, I don't take it. Why don't you take it?
I'm totally using my Amex card to pay for camp this summer. All right. So I feel like that's a pretty good and thorough coverage of the credit card differences. I don't know why ACH and eCheck also has the similar sort of imprint on our psyche from like the early digital days. Like we can't get it together and figure out what that is. It's like, why is it an ACH or is it an eCheck? Or is it a check? Or is it my debit card? I don't know. Why I feel like a caveman when I have to think about or explain this.
Well, let's demystify a bit. And you're right. It's like, when's the last time I wrote a check? Some of us write checks frequently. Some of us haven't ever written a check. Yeah. My children go, what's a check? Yeah. The reality of that is that, yes, the paper checks are definitely somewhat disappearing in the world because they have to be handled. They have to be mailed. They have to be accounted for. They need to be processed. And as much as we make it simple with mobile check deposits by taking a picture of them with your iPhone, it still has to be handled. Well, an electronic check uses the ACH or automated clearinghouse system, as opposed to the debit networks or the credit card rails, the network, credit card world. This is the banking ACH side of the house. And that's what it is. It is literally saying, hey, from the camp owner to the parent, if you provide us permission and the details of what's on the face of your check, we're going to use that permission and those details to go out and debit your bank for this agreed upon amount, the deposit, the balance due, a payment cycle, whatever. So it's an electronic version of payment acceptance that goes through directly to your bank account and doesn't ever touch the credit card world.
So are you saying that ACH and e-check is the same exact thing?
We use those words interchangeably. Electronic checks, e-checks, and ACH are used interchangeably to describe.
Why do people think that an ACH might be automatic or recurring?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to, again, a paper check is that permission to debit, right? An electronic agreement to debit uses the ACH system. And that e-check simply means you never need a physical check. It's an electronic version of that representation, right? So that is typically, it can be a virtual terminal you log into and put in the credentials, or it can be, we call it an API integration to a solution, to a database, right? That handles that transaction. But just like the credit cards, it has to archive the agreement, the permission, and the data details that were presented. And they need to be good information going forward. What's really good about Camp is Camp's transaction is so far ahead of the actual Camp experience. One of the pitfalls of ACH or e-checks is the timing of it. It's not a guaranteed product. It's emulating the transfer of a paper check. So there's a time frame that has to be acknowledged when you go out and ask for the money, and when the money clears into your bank. That can take time. And so the beauty of Camp is payments are accepted in advance. That timeline's acceptable. Does that make sense?
Totally. So I asked about the recurring nature because I think this is my experience explaining e-checks to people. They assumed that because they have set up ACH recurring payments inside their personal finance bank account, that setting up an ACH payment would by default not be a one-time. It'd be like oh, you're going to do this again. You're going to have power to do this again.
Oh, gotcha.
It's funny. That's a director user question. Like in the early days of ACH, people would have those questions, and even like recently.
A lot of distrust. A lot of people said, what do you mean you want my bank account information? Again, we kind of take that as sacred. Like, no, you can't have that information.
Yes.
Well, you realize when you give me a check, you're giving me that information. So, but yes, that actually absolutely speaks to what did I agree to and what did I authorize, right? What did I approve happening? Is it a one-time payment or is it an ongoing payment? And that all has to do with what's agreed to, what's acknowledged, and then what your system allows. Great point.
Yeah.
And here's the difference though, because if I'm in my bank account and I authorize a bill payment like that, an e-check to go from my bank, I'm pushing it as the consumer.
Yeah.
But in the ACH e-check world for camps, you're actually the one originating it. You're the one saying, yes, I have permission to go pull this money from my client, my customer.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting. The other piece of that is the time delay that you touched on.
Yes.
Now, for people that resolve, books to know how much money they have or will have to expect, what's the average real-time time delay? If I enrolled, I have two computers, I enrolled two kids with my two different Chase cards, charging you two different rates for your camp. But one's a debit, or you do e-check, and one's a credit card. How much later is the e-check money going to actually get there?
That's a wonderful distinction, and thank you for asking. Because in that credit card transaction, that approval means you're good to go, right? That approval you get instantly says it's a good card number, it's a good amount. Yep, you're approved to take this money. And that money will typically be in your bank within 1 to 2 days, right? Depending on the day you transact or the time of day, could be there tomorrow, could be there the day after, but that's fast.
Yeah.
In an e-check, it actually goes like this. Oh, you give me permission to take it? Okay. Is today a bank day? Yes. Well, then today, at the end of the day, we're going to send that information into the first bank in the equation, which is the acquirer's bank that says, oh, this is good information. Thank you. We're going to now send it off to the parent's bank. And the parent's bank has 3 more bank days in which to even respond to that request. So happens today. Tomorrow, the first bank is sending it out to the second bank, right? The parent's bank. They'd have 3 more days before they even have to reply that it's a good transaction. Now, does it happen faster than that? Most of the time it does happen faster, but because they're allowed 72 hours or 3 bank days to respond, look at what's happening to this timeline, right? It's already day 5 before we can trust that this is good information coming back from their bank. So once we get to there, the next day we're like, okay, now we can release the funds. Releasing them means they'll post the next day in your bank account. So boom, you're at a week within a good system that's a week long. And if it happens other than a Monday, you got weekends involved now. Because the banks don't move stuff over weekends, right?
And so there's a bunch of trap doors in here that we won't go down in terms of APIs and why you would build slowness into a system like this. But the thing that I want to clarify and just kind of highlight is that you probably don't ever view, if you're in a camp database software, you're never viewing the distinction between my 2 applications.
True.
It's just in your bank account or not.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And the kind of the reason why I think that becomes important for people just to know, if you're a camp director and someone pays the e-check 4 days later, you might not have the money. So if they call to cancel or change, or you try to issue a refund, or they say, I want to switch session, then it changes rate. There's a million different scenarios that could come up. But if you don't know that the money is not equal, even though the application and the kid and the sessions, all the stuff being equal, it's just not the same.
Very true. Yes, it's essential to reconcile, not just reconcile the daily activity, but to reconcile the deposits in your bank against the daily activity. And some organizations do that daily, weekly, monthly, and others it may be a longer time frame. And that's always something that I typically talk with my clients about is, what is your reconciliation? Are you double checking? Because it's trust, but verify, right? Don't assume, trust and verify.
Yeah, man.
And you just touched on something even more important, and that is, you're right. Oh, I ran all the transactions today and this family told me that's not the right amount, or I didn't agree to this, or oh no, I pressed the wrong button. And then it's important to go in there and void or stop a transaction before it cycles on a daily basis, because then money doesn't move. But in the e-checks, if you go try to request that money and then you try to give it back the next day, well, you haven't even gotten the money yet. So if you give it back and you don't ultimately get it.
Don't cut a check yet.
Right? It's like, whoa, tell them, let's acknowledge it. Make sure it's successful before you give that money back, right?
So this is a perfect segue. It's like we mapped it out. If we were to have an issue like that and need to resolve it, we would have to dig deeper into the layers, beneath the surface to get to the gateway and manage this. So this is probably a good time to talk about the exact solutions that are cobbled together to actually make all of these different pathways of payments occur.
Absolutely.
So this is we can probably take the same example of like the e-check that was initiated on a Wednesday, and on Friday I want to cancel it. I could cancel that camper in my software, but that's not going to have anything to do, or it might have something to do with how does that relate to the money that I'm trying to collect and that I'm trying to return?
That's a great question. And again, depending on the solution you're using and how it's configured and how it's set up and how it interacts with the actual e-check processor, can be different. So I'll try not to generalize. I'll try not to talk about specifics because many of them are different.
But in the click world, in the click sphere.
Well, in the click sphere, it's our payment gateway for e-checks. We have that full visibility into what's the status. We provide that visibility to our partner organizations that integrate to us. And we kind of keep that as real and live information, updating at a minimum on a daily basis. And so we will not only share those kind of rules and permissions, if you will, about the system, but also support our partners in giving that information on to what is the database, what is the camp professionals portal, right?
Yeah.
And so in our world, you can see it, you can see the status, and you make good decisions on it. Okay, it's approved, but not yet settled. I can void it. I can stop it from moving. Now it's settled. I really should wait until it's cleared, and cleared being give it that window of time before reversing it. And with all things, when you take a payment, the refund or response to a payment should be matched. It should be connected, right? If you take a credit card payment, refund to that credit card. If you take an e-check, refund to that e-check, right?
Yeah. And so this is where you know, as a camp director, this happens. This is not a frequent thing, right? This is like, there are some out of 100% of the transactions, maybe 5% are reversals or changes, maybe 10% if you have lots of sessions. And then the subsegment of those that are e-checks require this additional view to be like, okay, what is the status of this transaction before I modify it?
Yeah.
And this is a whole nother sheet. I feel like I need to whiteboard this for but like submitted, approved,
yes,
accepted.
Yep. Closed.
Closed.
And what can go wrong? It can get rejected because bad information was provided. It can get returned.
That happened to us once. We had a rejected e-check that we cut a check on, so now they owed us back their refund that they never got.
Yeah, a reject can because they put the number in one digit wrong or something like that, right?
No, it wasn't fraudulent. It's like the check is wrong, right?
Or if it's a recurring transaction, maybe the one bank bought another bank and it changed the account number string. So you had good information when you took this information, but now a couple months down the road, it's going to reject and say, hey, this has been updated. You got to change this, or this didn't succeed. You got to go back and do it again. And then there's the returns. Again, a return is where it made it all the way to that other bank and the bank said, sorry, insufficient funds. That account's closed. That account's frozen. They don't authorize you to do this. Those are the return code opportunity or issues, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is a little bit of a deep dive, admittedly, but this is the why you need. This is an example of why you need to understand if you're a camp director that's in charge of finances or has worse in terms of more complexity. If you're managing other people that are managing the finances, you got to be able to understand what's actually happening with the money.
Absolutely. Yes. Again, goes back to don't assume, trust and verify, and know how this works out. The benefit is huge. Giving parents a choice between credit cards and electronic check gives them another payment method. It also has a huge opportunity to reduce your costs because the cost of e-check processing is much less than credit cards because it eliminates the interchange categories, right? So that's the why, the real why, choice and cost, right?
Yeah, and so and I know a couple of camps who have said they'll take e-check only.
Yes. There, in fact, I have multiple clients that were way holdouts for taking any payments other than cash or check, and opened the door to e-checks long before they considered credit cards because it's just an electronic representation of what they were doing.
Yeah.
And when it comes to those registration solutions, we've had those that have adopted early and continue to support. We have those that accepted e-checks and then did away with them because they didn't have a critical mass within their acceptance within their customer base, but have since re-engaged with it because there's greater appeal and greater acceptance from consumers. And again, it gets choice and it reinforces lower costs for the business.
Yeah, man, that's it. There's so much. It's like we're just scratching the surface too. There's like so much more. So one of the other things that comes out of, and we probably have some terms to define too. We've thrown out there, and I don't know if I even used them correctly because I've heard you say them before. But the term gateway. What is a gateway?
What is a gateway?
What is a gateway? What does it do? Who is are you the gateway? Am I the gateway?
So years ago, they were just physical boxes on the counter, plugged into a phone line, and then all of a sudden, we got Ethernet cables, right?
I would have called that a terminal.
That's a terminal. You're right.
Is a terminal the same thing as a gateway?
Gateways came out of terminals, right? So you had terminals, that's how you accepted payments. Electronic checks and everything else is all keyed into a terminal. Well, the World Wide Web opened the door to creating a virtual terminal, an online payment gateway that allows you to do those transactions in a secure way, opening the door to more information, more data, more collection of transactional information, not limited to what's on that card or what's on or functionally keyed into a terminal, right? So a payment gateway is just that.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me replay that with my kind of first time years. Because as much as we've spoken about this, we've never really discussed this thing before. The difference between the hardware of the old school terminal and the digital gateway is that once the information that's on the card is entered into a gateway, it can be augmented or appended with information that is not on the card that enhances the transaction.
Absolutely.
How'd I do?
Think of email addresses and physical addresses and invoice numbers and you know what I mean? Anything under the sun you can attach to that transaction. Which
I now understand from our discussion of the payment process and the payment cycle that's important to get a lower cost, more secure transaction. Now I'm going to graduate to take a payment by the end of this. So, okay. So that's
very well said.
That's a gateway.
Yep.
I totally get a gateway. Who is a gateway?
There are quite a few gateways out there.
Okay. So, but are they name branded? Or is it like a Visa gateway? Is it like a Click gateway?
There are some that are very much a name brand that's recognized within business, and there are the others that you've never heard their name before. An example of a name brand gateway would be authorize.net. Okay, so authorize.net is a commonly used payment gateway that integrates to shopping carts and e-commerce and all sorts of software products.
Yeah.
Their big brother is called CyberSource for the big enterprise levels. Okay. PayPal is a gateway, believe it or not. PayPal has gateways that support business as well, not just PayPal transactions. Okay. Bambora is a gateway product. In fact, it's just changed its name recently. That's based out of Canada and is widely used.
Sure.
And then there's one called NMI, or Network Merchants. And NMI is a name not frequently referred to because most processors will kind of white label it and kind of use it as a backbone to provide services. So that is widely used, but not necessarily a household name, right?
Got it. Okay. So conceptually, as a camp director, I'm taking a payment, I'm sending it through my gateway, whatever my gateway is, to take that transaction. And then the other term that we used, where was it?
Tokenization.
Yes, that data gets tokenized.
Yeah.
What? You would like a Bitcoin?
Tokens. So again, going all the way back to those terminals, the terminals were securely transferring data, right? They're taking all that card information and passing it through for approvals and authorizations. So that transaction can be secure and encrypted to be just a kind of a one-way transaction, right? Or a call and receive, if you will. But to be both compliant and secure and ensure that that information can't be hacked or stolen or received and intercepted, there's a term called tokenization. And tokenization is where that information is taken and then it's kind of separated and stored separately and then can be called upon to reassemble for future transactions. And so that way you're not taking the card number and expiration date and CVV is never stored, but address, things of that nature. That information should never be in one place. So oftentimes in a payment gateway, you'll see that card number after you transact, half of it disappears, right? You're left with maybe just the last 4 digits or maybe the first 6 digits in the last 4. We call that truncating.
Yeah.
Truncating is securely displaying card information not in its entirety, right?
Okay. So the tokenization, it's like you're pixelating an image of information, scattering it, you can pull it back in the right place.
Exactly. So it can be a future transaction. It can be securely run again. It can be updated without it ever being in one place where it can be stolen. Or
do the gateways store the tokens?
Gateways are part of that process. They can be the source of tokenization. There's actually tokenization entities that are separate from gateways. So you can be using a gateway that calls upon a different entity for that token. So it can be separate or contained within. Both are available.
Okay, cool.
And important, critically important in terms of compliance.
Well, and then you start talking about the world of apps and APIs and who's, where is this information getting sent?
Yes.
Acquiring banks, and then you're having this, what does API stand for?
Oh my goodness.
Application.
Yeah, protocol interface, something. You caught me.
We both should know what that stands for.
We should. Footnote, insert
automated program
descriptor here.
Check out the show notes for the real answer. In case you haven't Googled it already. Okay, so that's the hardware technical terms for what's happening with the data. It's appended and I'm picturing like a good marketing image of like a photo that gets pixelated and floating. Okay, so now with this data and this infrastructure in place and a clear, best practices of communication and terms and all this stuff being deployed, there were a couple of things that we wanted to talk about in terms of the future of what next with this information. Now that I have a secure, my cell phone number and you have a tokenized credit card saved for me and connected to the gateway, can I just text you like the word hoodie? You charge me $50 and then give it to me?
Yes. You can send invoices. You can send an email that gives a secure link for someone to log on to pay. You can send QR codes. You can scan the QR code and pay to the QR code. You can do a text to pay solution so that not only is it a text out to acknowledge this, make the payment, or it can be even a text where it's a text that says, just to confirm you want to do this, so that they're actually replying back saying, yes, I want to do this. Okay, go ahead and pay.
Which
you getting that back and forth of confirmation, right?
Which you would love to do just in case there's ever a chargeback and a dispute. Be like, nah, I texted you and you replied, yes. You circled back. Do you like me? Yes or no?
That's all of what's available if you're going beyond just transacting a credit card number and an expiration date and dollar amount, right? You've got all that information. There's so much more interchange and proof of involvement from your customer.
This is why I can't help but deep dive into specialized apps like this, because the world of getting a text to pay reminder before your monthly credit card payment, like automatedly, and that it doesn't go through unless they reply with a capital Y, not a lowercase y, not a yes, capital Y. Oh my gosh, Kenny, I love that.
Well, and one of the nice parts of ACH is people don't change bank accounts very often, but credit cards update all the time.
Yeah.
And that's information that if you're making payments over a year can be, problematic. The cards change and things update, right?
Yeah. And I'm in my email marketing world. I'm thinking of like, oh, what are the merge fields I can pull on here? Like, can I be like, dear Kenny, Ken is your nickname, which I know is not your nickname, but like you have $1,000 balance and a card, tokenized on file here ending in 232. Do you want to pay $1,000 now? Like, can you get that granular? Like,
absolutely.
In terms of the tokenization, like my email merges where I'm like doing all that stuff?
Definitely. In fact, I'm going to take it to another level for you. And that is,
oh no, you didn't.
I am. I'm going to go deeper. Hey, what's going on with Bitcoin these days, right? How would you like to add that option on top of it? Oh, would you like to pay with Bitcoin? Sure. Here you go.
You know I'm a new crypto fanatic.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, well, not everybody is. I'm learning. Some people are. And so this is definitely, I'm just going to read the label on this door, the trap door that we are not going to go down. But the sub-segment of crypto that I'm really interested in is community tokens, which is a different kind of tokenization. And I know you're a soccer American or European football fan. A lot of the European clubs are tokenizing, so you get rewards, and they're like digital currency for for your season ticket purchase, for your buying your hoodie, for buying a hot dog or whatever it is. I think that world is going to come to great communities that are real world communities. So we'll go down there. That's another series, a whole other thing. But I wanted to go on record saying I think we might be able to help make it happen with the click way.
Awesome. That's awesome. And that's I mentioned our pay by click gateway for ACH. Really, it's expanded beyond that. And that's what's being added into it is not only, Bitcoin acceptance, crypto acceptance into it, along with credit card acceptance. But and again, we a little bit teased that whole chargeback and alert management system's all embedded in there as well. So great resources coming. So much technology opportunity and advancement.
My mind is blowing with the metaverse, man. Right. Daily. All right, so I'm looking through my notes here. The one other thing we kind of skipped over is a stalwart of the way things were when we first started taking credit cards online is the thing like OSHA weighing over you during staff training, PCI compliance. Yeah.
You want me to go there?
What are there like little FBI, people like waiting with their black suits on, like investigating what it gives? What is this?
Yes. Yeah, in essence it is. What happened with all of this personal data? It's PCI stands for Payment Card Industry. And the full term is PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. What happened was the card brands all came together and said, hey, with more and more card usage, more and more ways people pay, there's more and more vulnerabilities to that information, your personal data that exists on that piece of plastic or in your smartphone. And so they wrote these rules that apply to everybody involved in credit card processing, from you, the camp owner director, from you, the marketing company, to the acquiring banks, to the issuing banks, and to the consumers. Everyone's responsible to protect that data. So these rules govern how everybody who accepts payments handles that data. That's what PCI is all about. And so to this monumental task of education and accountability is what is at play here. And the compliance regulation speaks to everybody who says, okay, I'm going to take on the responsibility and the opportunity of accepting payments. So what's my role? What is my responsibility? And that is to ensure I'm not compromising my customers' information. And that's accomplished through typically a third-party solution. There are multiple third-party solutions, TrustWave, security metrics, control scan, yada, 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 right? These are all these entities that are responsible to maintain this compliance. And they do so, and the responsibility for the camp owner and director is to know that this is something you need to do on an annual basis. You need to acknowledge, you need to log in and review and make a statement of how you interact with and what choices you make and what solutions you use, and to kind of reaffirm that, no, I'm not storing information in an unsecure way. I'm using a compliant solution. So you're making that review, you're answering the self-assessment questionnaire, and you're kind of agreeing to it. And through that process, that you're protecting yourself as a business. If you fail to do that, or you don't recognize the importance of it, and there ever is a data breach, well, then you've got liability. You've got responsibility and liability, right?
This is the big promise, the biggest promise that we don't know that we're really issuing as a camp director.
Yeah.
Taking the, like I've seen camp people write down credit cards because the internet's down on a napkin, and it's like, where is that going? And this is something to know about.
Well, it's a lack of awareness and understanding and appreciation for that, right? So what can you do? As I'm an owner, I'm a director, I'm responsible for this process. You can look at the choices you're making. You're looking at your behaviors, your staff's behaviors. You're looking at, how do you handle that? Making sure everyone knows, don't email a full credit card number through the internet, right? Through your email. It's like, So it's things like that. It's also selecting solutions and partners that have made choices to protect you, to insure you, or to take on that responsibility for you. And then there's also the insurance side. Talk to your insurance carrier. Make sure you have adequate coverage to support your organization, right?
Is this a specific type of insurance?
It is.
That is excluded from an umbrella that a camp would normally have?
Yes. And many processors provide data breach insurance, but the reality, the true exposure in it, it's not enough. Like you'll hear again and again, you don't have enough homeowners insurance, you don't have enough car or automobile insurance. You'll never have enough from a provider.
Yeah.
You definitely need to review that with your broker or your insurance company.
Wow. I feel like this could be a never-ending episode of this, because there are so many individual things. So we do have to, start wrapping up. But there's one question that we can't skip, which is, when we're talking about money, I don't think we've addressed this anywhere else yet. The convenience fees that camps decide, sometimes arbitrarily, to do or not do. That is like, there's a monumental shift in the entity when they decide to either consume the cost and pass it through in a hidden price increase, or explain that it's there and pass it through in an overt convenience charge fee. Yeah. What gives? Where the difference? Is it just a personal choice? Give us the Kenny Brook tape.
It's a conversation I have almost weekly, if not more often. And historically, this wasn't ever really a carve out, because there was such there's almost a target on businesses who separated out a cost of processing, a surcharge, right? Convenience fee surcharge.
A target in which sense?
Well, the target was multiple. Not only did the card brands say historically, you must treat our card like cash, therefore you can't add costs to it. So that was always a card brand rule for 50 years, right? From the local, state, or even smaller local entities, you had the department, you had laws related to consumer advocacy, consumer protection, where it said, no, you can't do this. If you do it, you have to do it this way, or yada, 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 right? So there was 5 years ago, there was 10 different states that had laws on the books to limit businesses' ability to do this.
I remember there was like a specific hardware that was coming up back in the day that was like, could figure out which state the card belonged to. that
Yes. No, thank you for asking, because
right. This is like a thing. This was like its own industry, was beating the laws of the disparate states.
And that is the key. The key to truly do it correctly is to identify what form of payment's being used, where do they reside, right? So it needs to acknowledge the billing information from the consumer. Are they in Connecticut? Are they using, a Visa? And what is that card they're using? So the technology actually takes that all into account and says, no, you can't add a convenience fee surcharge, or you can't add a surcharge, or yes, you can, but it's limited to this amount.
So this is like my tokenized, pixelated, blown up image of the family registering for camp. The state, the pixels that has their state goes into a part of how you're transacting and comes back with different numbers for all states and
absolutely. Or here's another example: the debit card. If you're actually using your Visa from Chase, and it's a debit card because it's debiting your bank account, that card is not allowed to be debited, no matter what state you're in, or sorry, not allowed to be surcharged. So that should be in consideration. Yeah. So there are solutions that do this in the compliant way. There are solutions that can only do it in a compliant way with an interchange pass-through model. And many of the solutions that exist right now do this in a partial way. So as I said, it's really important to look at that. Look at where your consumers are, what states you operate in, and have that real conversation. And the card brands, specifically Visa and MasterCard, require you to register, to go on their website, fill out the information to say, I'm surcharging. This is how much, and here's my business URL, my website, and to actually go online 30 days before you apply a surcharge. It's a requirement from Visa and MasterCard. Yep. So thank you for asking, because you're right. Many businesses just go, I can't absorb it. I've got to pass it along. I see that surcharge when I make purchases, so I'm okay with it. It really does require more thought, more consideration, and a review.
Have you seen this come back to bite people because they kind of rushed it and started doing something, and then they kind of got in hot water for it?
I did. And one of my earliest examples was a company that sold a physical product online, and it was both wholesale and consumer based. And the wholesale community didn't really have much of a problem with the surcharging as it was done. But there was a consumer that took major issue with it and complained not only to the state level, but complained to the card brand level too. And yeah, that's a not only a, hey, cease and desist, change your practices, but also you got issues. So
and now we're going to look under the hood.
Yeah, and it goes back to, again, the type of relationships you have to your parents. If you have the type of relationship where parents will call you up and say, hey, I'm not okay with this, or let's have a conversation about it, that's important. Yeah. But if you're the type of organization that has thousands of participants and you have no relationship to your parent, there's going to be a large amount of exposure there, right?
Yeah. Interesting. The risk is hedged by the relationship, or exposed by the relationship, depending on which way you go. Wow.
Here's one more tease. Yeah. And that is, maybe go here, not now, but tips for counselors, gratuities for counselors. I'm curious to know about that, because I do know camps that do it. I have camps that don't. And I have a solution for them. So I'm just curious to know more about that. So I leave that as a tease.
This is a real cliffhanger. You're bad. How to solve that. Oh my gosh. That's great. So you'll have to hear more about that, and we'll have a general tips episode coming up, all with some tips and tricks for nonprofits, specifically for people that have camp tipping is allowed, permitted, and you want to endorse that. So you have to tune in next time. But for now, Kenny, I think this is so helpful. I learned a lot, and I knew, but we had the same conversation 3 times. So I certainly hope some new and seasoned camp directors picked up some new tips and are more well equipped for this season.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Until next time, we'll see you. This is Camp Business Financials, Money Moves at Summer Camp. And that was Camper Machine, the final episode of our Money Moves at Summer Camp series with Kenny Brook from Click. If you want to learn more about Kenny and the payment processing for camps, you can check out click.com and learn more about marketing automation at campermachine.com.